I evicted my parents. I said it calmly, the way you say something that has already finished hurting you. The sentence landed heavy in the room anyway. The wedding planner blinked. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet question in his thumb. I didn't explain. There wasn't time, and honestly, there hadn't been time for years. People think family stories begin softly, with misunderstandings. Mine didn't. Mine began with a door slamming and my mother's voice sharp as glass. "Don't come back home," she said. Not yelled. Worse. Measured. But that came much later. When I was a child, I learned early how to read a room by the set of my father's jaw. I learned how to fold myself smaller at the dinner table so my elbows wouldn't brush his newspaper. I learned that love, in our house, came with conditions and receipts. My older brother Daniel never learned those things. He didn't have to. Daniel was the golden child, the miracle boy who could do no wrong. When he spilled juice on the carpet, my mother laughed and said boys would be boys. When I did the same, she sighed like I'd aged her another year and handed me a towel without looking at my face. At 8 years old, I knew the difference between fairness and favoritism. At 10, I knew money was the sharpest edge of it. Daniel got piano lessons. I got told to be grateful I could hear him practice for free. Daniel got a brand new bike for his 12th birthday, red and gleaming, the plastic still clinging to the seat. I got a card the following month. Late, signed hastily, with $20 tucked inside and a reminder to spend it wisely. I did. I bought notebooks, school supplies, things that felt like permission to want more. My parents were not poor. That's important. My father ran a small construction business. Nothing flashy, but steady. Contracts with the city, renovations, cash that came home in manila envelopes and got counted at the kitchen table while I did homework nearby, the smell of sawdust clinging to his jacket. Money was discussed freely when it came to Daniel's future. "College is an investment," my father would say, tapping his pen. "We need to think long-term." When I asked quietly what that meant for me, my mother didn't even look up from her dishwater. "We'll see," she said. "Girls figure things out." By high school, the unfairness had numbers attached to it. Daniel's SAT prep course cost more than my entire year of clothes. I remember the envelope, thick, cream-colored, addressed to the testing center. My mother sealed it with a satisfied press of her thumb. That same week, I handed her a form for a school trip. 2 nights. Educational. Discounted. She read it, lips pursed, then slid it back to me across the counter. "We can't afford extras right now," she said. I stood there holding the paper, watching her turn back to a catalog, one with glossy photos of dorm rooms Daniel might like someday. I learned to stop asking. I worked after school, saved quietly. When I got a partial scholarship offer for a local university, my father nodded like this had been the plan all along. "See?" he said. "Independent. That's good for you." Daniel went out of state, tuition paid, car included, a blue sedan with heated seats. I took the bus and carried my books in a backpack with a broken zipper. My fingers numb in winter. Still, I tried. God, I tried. Every holiday, I came home with something to prove. Grades, certificates, job offers. I laid them out like offerings. My mother smiled thinly. My father asked how Daniel was doing before I finished my sentences. At 22, I graduated. No party, no banner. Just a dinner where my mother reminded me to clear my plate because dishes don't wash themselves. Daniel dropped out that same year. "It's just not for him," my parents said, protective, defensive. "He needs time." Time turned into money. Money turned into excuses. They refinanced the house once. Then again. I noticed because my name kept coming up in conversations that stopped when I entered the room. "We're just talking logistics," my father would say too quickly. Logistics became late-night whispers, became files stacked neatly on the dining table, became my mother asking, out of nowhere, if I trusted family. I was 26 when they asked me to come over for a serious talk. The house looked the same framed photos of Daniel's childhood trophies, same couch with the sagging cushion no one was allowed to replace. My mother had baked, which she only did when she wanted something. She poured tea with hands that didn't shake. My father sat across from me, fingers steepled, eyes studying my face like a blueprint. "There's an opportunity," he began. I listened. I always did. He talked about investments, about restructuring, about helping the family business survive a rough patch. My name came up again, carefully, wrapped in praise. "You're responsible," my mother said, smiling now. "You've always been." A folder slid across the table toward me. "Just take a look," my father said. I stared at the folder, beige, plain. My name typed neatly on the tab. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear yet, but recognition. The feeling you get when the air changes before a storm. I reached out and touched the edge of the folder. And that's where I'll stop. Because what they were about to ask me to do would change everything. The folder felt heavier than paper should. I opened it slowly, the way you open something that might bite. Inside were documents stacked with precise alignment. Loan terms, property descriptions, signature lines waiting like open mouths. My father cleared his throat. "This is temporary," he said, "just until things stabilize." I scanned the first page, then the second. My name appeared everywhere. Borrower, guarantor, cosigner. Words like collateral and default sat calmly in black ink, pretending they weren't weapons. "What is this?" I asked. My mother reached across the table and touched my wrist, light and familiar, the way she used to when I was small and sick. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's just paperwork," she said. "We need to move some things around." I kept reading. The property address made my stomach drop. It was the house. My house. 2 years earlier, after saving obsessively and living in a studio that smelled like old paint, I'd bought a small place on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just solid. Mine. My parents had congratulated me in the way people do when they don't quite approve. Now, according to the documents, that house was listed as collateral for a loan, their loan. "I never agreed to this," I said quietly. My father leaned back. His chair creaked. "We're asking you to agree now." The room felt smaller. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to hurt. "For Daniel," my mother added softly, as if that explained everything. I looked up at her. Really looked. The faint lines around her mouth. The practiced calm. The certainty that I would bend. "What happened?" I asked. "What did he do?" They exchanged a glance. A quick one, but loaded. "He had a business idea," my father said. "It didn't pan out." I almost laughed. Instead, I flipped another page. This wasn't small. This wasn't temporary. This was a 6-figure loan with brutal terms. Miss one payment, and the lender could seize the collateral. My home. "I could lose my house," I said. "You won't," my mother said immediately. Too fast. "We won't let that happen." I closed the folder. My hands were steady, which surprised me. "Why isn't Daniel here?" I asked. Silence. "He's stressed," my father said. "This kind of thing upsets him." Of course it does, I thought. Consequences tend to. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. "I need time," I said. My mother's hand tightened on my wrist. "We need an answer tonight." I pulled free gently. "Then the answer is no." Her face changed then. Not anger, disappointment, the kind that feels rehearsed. You're really going to let your brother lose everything? She asked. I stared at her. What about me? She sighed like I was being difficult. You'll land on your feet. You always do. That was the moment. The exact one. I left without another word. For 3 days, my phone rang nonstop. Missed calls. Voicemails that shifted from pleading to sharp-edged guilt. We raised you, my father said in one. Family helps family. On the 4th day, Daniel called. His voice was shaky. I heard you're being stubborn. I laughed then. A short, disbelieving sound. Is that what this is? You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he said. Everyone's counting on me. Everyone? I asked. Or just me? He hung up. A week later, I got a letter. Not from my parents. From the lender. I sat at my kitchen counter, sunlight spilling across the wood, and read the words twice before they made sense. There it was. My signature. Perfectly written. Carefully forged. My breath came shallow. My ears rang. They hadn't asked for permission. They'd already done it. I drove to my parents' house in a haze, letter clenched in my fist. My mother answered the door, her smile ready. Sweetheart. I held up the paper. Her smile faltered, just for a second. You signed my name, I said. My father appeared behind her, took one look and closed his eyes. We were going to tell you, he said. When? My voice cracked despite my effort. After I lost my house? My mother crossed her arms. Don't be dramatic. Something inside me went very still. That's fraud, I said. For family, she corrected. I stepped back, the porch boards solid under my feet. Undo it. My father shook his head. It's done. Behind his shoulder, I saw Daniel sitting on the couch, scrolling his phone, not even pretending to listen. I looked at all of them. The house. The familiar walls that had never really held me. If I lose my home, I said slowly, I will never forgive you. My mother's voice hardened. Then maybe you shouldn't come back here. There it was. Clean. Clear. Don't come back home. I nodded once, turned, walked away. That night, I sat on my bed in the house that might not be mine much longer and stared at the walls, memorizing them. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because somewhere beneath the shock, something else was forming. Quiet, focused, and patient. And it was done being the responsible one. Silence can be louder than screaming. After that night, I went quiet. No calls, no texts. I didn't announce ultimatums or threaten police reports. I knew my parents too well for that. Noise made them defensive. Silence made them careless. The lender's letter sat on my kitchen table for days. I kept it there on purpose. Every time I passed it, my stomach tightened. But something else sharpened too. Clarity. I started with the obvious. I took a day off work and went to the county records office, the kind of building that smells like dust and old paper. The clerk slid documents across the counter with bored efficiency. Deeds, liens, filing dates. There it was in black and white. A second mortgage had been taken out against my property, filed 3 weeks earlier. My forged signature sat neatly at the bottom of the page, confident and wrong. I stared at it longer than I needed to. You okay? The clerk asked, not really caring. Yes, I said. I just need copies of everything. At home, I laid the papers out across the floor like a crime scene. Dates, names, numbers. I noticed things I hadn't before. Addresses that didn't match, initials that weren't mine, a notary stamp from a town I'd never been to. Sloppy. They had assumed I wouldn't look too closely. I called a lawyer next. Not a family friend. Not someone my parents might know. A woman with a calm voice and sharp questions. Do you have proof you didn't sign? She asked. I can get it, I said. And I did. I pulled bank records showing I'd been at work the day the documents were notarized. Security logs, emails, calendar entries. I even found an old text from my mother that morning. Can't talk now. Busy with paperwork. Paperwork. The word made my jaw clench. The lawyer listened, took notes, then said the sentence that changed how I breathed. This is criminal fraud. I closed my eyes. What happens next? I asked. That depends on what you want, she said. But you're in a strong position. Strong. It felt strange to hear that word applied to me in the context of my family. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I heard through relatives that Daniel had turned things around, that he was confident again, that my parents were relieved. I knew why. They thought they'd won. I showed up to family gatherings like nothing had happened. Quiet. Polite. I smiled when spoken to. I didn't bring up the house. I didn't mention lawyers or documents. My mother watched me closely at first, suspicion flickering in her eyes. But weeks passed, then months. She relaxed. That's when the mistakes started. One afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen during a cousin's birthday party. The room smelled like cake and coffee. Laughter floated in from the living room. "You've been very mature about all this," she said, lowering her voice. I met her eyes. "About what?" She hesitated, then smiled thinly. "You know, helping out." I nodded. Family helps family. Her shoulders eased. Validation always did that to her. Later that day, I overheard my father on the phone in the hallway. "No, it's secure," he said. "Her house covers it." I took out my phone and started recording. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there, heart pounding, capturing every word. At night, I replayed the audio, headphones pressed tight, listening to his certainty. His confidence that I was an asset, not a person. The final piece came unexpectedly. My grandmother died that winter. At the reading of her will, we sat in a small office that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Daniel slouched in his chair. My parents held hands. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. The house, her house, was to be sold. Proceeds divided. I waited. And, he continued, a personal letter, to be given to my granddaughter. He handed me an envelope. My mother's head snapped toward me. "What letter?" I opened it slowly. My grandmother's handwriting wavered but was unmistakable. "I know they treat you differently," she wrote. "I've seen it. I tried to protect what I could. Check the safety deposit box. I left you copies." My fingers trembled. Inside the box a week later, I found them. Old documents. A prior version of my grandmother's will. Notes. And most importantly, a signed affidavit from years ago, stating that my parents had pressured her to change beneficiaries in Daniel's favor. A pattern. I sat in my car afterward, the papers on the passenger seat, and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in me since childhood. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd lived beyond it for decades. I stopped answering calls altogether then. Let messages pile up. Let anxiety grow on their side for once. My wedding invitations went out in the spring. Cream cardstock. Elegant, precise. My parents received theirs like everyone else. They called immediately. "We need to talk," my father said, voice tight. "I know," I said. "You can come to the wedding." Silence. "You're not angry?" my mother asked carefully. I smiled to myself. Not anymore. They took that as forgiveness. They were wrong. Because by then I had everything. Documents, recordings, timelines, witnesses. And I had chosen the moment. I would not confront them in private. I would do it where they had always cared the most. In public. Weddings make people careless. They soften faces. They loosen tongues. They convince everyone that nothing bad would dare to happen on a day designed for joy. My parents arrived early. I watched from a distance as they stepped into the venue, a restored old hall with high windows and pale wood floors. My mother wore pearls. My father wore the same suit he'd used for every important family moment. They looked proud, relieved, safe. When they saw me, my mother's face crumpled with emotion. She reached for me, arms open, eyes already wet. "There you are," she whispered. "You look beautiful." I let her hug me. I felt her hands press into my back, familiar and possessive. "You came," my father said, forcing a smile. "We weren't sure you'd want us here." I met his eyes. Of course I did. That answer settled them completely. Throughout the ceremony, I felt oddly calm. My vows came easily. My voice didn't shake. When I looked at my partner, I felt grounded, anchored in a future that did not require their approval. At the reception, glasses clinked. Music swelled. Laughter rose and fell like waves. Then came the speeches. The best man spoke. My maid of honor cried halfway through hers. Applause followed, warm and generous. Finally, I stood. A hush spread across the room. I felt it. Hundreds of eyes, expectant, kind. I smiled. "Thank you all," I began. "For being here. For supporting us. For celebrating love." My parents beamed at me from their table. "I want to talk for a moment," I continued, "about family." My mother's smile softened. She reached for my father's hand. "I grew up believing family meant sacrifice," I said. "That it meant some people give and others receive." A few guests nodded, assuming this was sentiment. "For a long time, I thought that was normal," I went on. "I thought it was my role." The room was quiet now, attentive. "But then," I said gently, "I learned the difference between love and use." My mother's hand froze. I took a breath. Slow. Steady. 2 years ago, my parents took out a loan using my house as collateral, I said, without my consent, by forging my signature. The silence was instant and total. My father half rose from his chair. "This is not the time." I lifted a hand. "Please, let me finish." I reached into the envelope I'd placed beneath the podium and pulled out copies. Not waved them, just held them. "These are the documents," I said, "filed with the county, and this—" I tapped my phone, connecting it to the speakers. "Is my father confirming it on a recorded call." His voice filled the hall. Calm, confident. "Her house covers it." A murmur spread, rippling outward. My mother stood abruptly. "You don't understand?" "I do," I said, finally turning to face her. "I understand very clearly." I looked around the room, at relatives, at friends, at people who had known only the version of my family my parents curated. "I also discovered this," I said, lifting another paper. "An affidavit from my grandmother, detailing years of financial pressure, a pattern of behavior." My father's face had gone gray. "This isn't true," my mother said, her voice sharp now. "She's twisting things." I met her gaze. "I'm not." I turned back to the room. "I stayed silent for months," I said. "Not because I was weak, but because I wanted the truth to speak for itself." I let the words hang. "The loan has been nullified," I continued calmly. "The lien removed. Charges were filed." Gasps. Someone covered their mouth. "And today," I said, my voice still even, "I want to be clear about something." I looked directly at my parents. "You are not welcome in my life anymore." My mother's face crumpled, not with sadness, but fury. "You would do this to us?" she hissed. "On your wedding day?" "Yes," I said, "because you taught me appearances matter, and because this is the last stage where you get to pretend." My father sank back into his chair, defeated. "I'm done being your safety net," I said softly. I'm done paying for your choices, and I'm done being quiet. I turned back to the guests, offering a small, genuine smile. Thank you for listening, I said. Now, let's celebrate honesty. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then my partner stood, applauded, slowly, deliberately. Others followed, not thunderous, but firm. My parents didn't join in. They left shortly after, slipping out through a side door, their heads down. I didn't watch them go. I stepped off the stage, my knees finally shaking, but my chest light. For the first time in my life, the truth had been louder than them, and it had won. After the music resumed, something unexpected happened. I laughed. Not the tight, polite laugh I'd learned growing up, but a real one. Surprised. Almost disbelieving. My partner leaned in, forehead against mine, and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded. I think I finally am. People didn't swarm me with questions the way I'd feared. They gave me space. A few hugged me quietly. One of my aunts squeezed my hand and said, "I always wondered." That was it. No speeches, no drama. The truth had already done its work. The rest of the night unfolded gently. Like a deep exhale. I danced. I ate cake. I noticed the way the lights caught the dust in the air, the way my partner's smile crinkled at the corners when he thought no one was watching. My parents did not come back. Their absence felt peaceful. The next morning there were messages, some angry, some pleading, some accusing me of cruelty. I didn't respond to any of them. The legal process finished quietly over the next few months. Just like my lawyer predicted, the evidence did the talking. The forged documents were voided. The lender went after the people who had actually signed. My house remained mine. I changed the locks anyway. Daniel tried once. He showed up unannounced, standing on my porch like a boy who'd lost his way. "You didn't have to destroy them," he said, eyes bloodshot, voice thin. I looked at him through the glass. "I didn't destroy anyone," I said. I stopped lying. He left without another word. I heard later that my parents had to sell their house, that the business folded, that Daniel moved back in with them, and then out again. Stories drifted to me through other people, softened and distorted with time. They no longer landed. In therapy, I learned something that surprised me. Grief doesn't always come from losing people. Sometimes it comes from finally seeing them clearly. I grieved the parents I never had, the safety I never felt, the version of myself that kept hoping things would change if I just tried harder. And then, slowly, I let those things go. On our first anniversary, my partner and I sat on the back steps of my house, watching the sun sink low. He rested his head on my shoulder. "You were brave," he said. I thought about that, about the years of silence, the patience, the fear. "No," I said. I was finished. There's a difference. Bravery is stepping forward despite fear. Being finished is realizing you don't owe anyone your pain anymore. I don't tell my story often, not because I'm ashamed, but because it's complete. It doesn't ask for validation. It doesn't need a villain anymore. If my parents ever beg again, it won't be at my door. And if they ever wonder why I didn't come back home, they already know.